Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. I don't know if I've ever really mentioned it, but before I started to spend all of my time building props, I was a traditional painter and illustrator. A side effect of that is that I have a ton of art supplies, and I am very particular about my art supplies storage. Right now, this workshop is severely lacking in the paint organization department, so today we're going to be looking at finally tackling that project. Let's take a look at what the painting area looks like right now, and also talk a little bit about what I actually want to do in terms of setup and organization. Here is the painting corner that we're going to be tackling today. Basically, this entire blank section here I've reserved for whatever paint storage that I need, and I definitely need a ton of paint storage. There are some little bits here that I just had to bring down because I needed to use them, but a lot of those are possibly going to get rehomed into more uniform storage. We'll see, I'm not sure, especially those ones. They're like very ununiform airbrush paint bottles, like they are a lot bigger than the typical model paints. This is mostly what I'm going to be tackling storage wise for this wall, and then that corner is going to be like 2-ounce acrylic craft paint bottles, and Merrick is still there because I haven't found a good spot for him yet. I'm gonna measure a bunch of stuff, figure out exactly what I want to try and make, and hopefully make something really cool and functional for this painting zone. I knew that I wanted to laser cut this paint storage because it's a lot more time and cost effective compared to 3D printing everything, especially with the amount of storage I need. I'll be using a Falcon2 Pro today that Creality very kindly sent over for me to play around with. It has a lot of awesome built-in features that we'll get into later on that made using it for this project absolutely amazing. Now, there are lots of great options out there in terms of pre-made laser cut files for hobby paint storage, but I decided on this particular one because it had the rows of paint offset from each other, so you can easily read all of the paint labels. It was also a bit bigger, so I wouldn't have to make as many individual units that I'd then need to attach to the wall. The long side pieces just fit within the Falcon2 Pro's work area, and it was really thanks to the built-in camera that this machine has that I was able to line up the material perfectly for these pieces to be cut out of. In Lightburn, which is the software I'm using, you can go into the camera controls and have it update the overlay image to help you place your material. I really cannot stress how much easier this feature makes things. I always found framing the pieces on the material to be the most frustrating part of laser cutting and engraving, and the camera makes it a non-issue. This machine also already comes with all of the essentials you'll need, like the enclosure built in as part of the machine, an air assist for cutting thicker material, and its own built-in slat system instead of something like a honeycomb board. For the 2-ounce craft paint bottles, I ended up designing my own units. There wasn't anything pre-made that I loved the layout of, and by designing it myself, it meant I could have it fit perfectly into the area that I wanted it installed in. I used Fusion 360 for this by exporting the sketch planes of each piece as a DXF file that I could then just drag into Lightburn. I had no idea if this would work well, but thankfully everything fit perfectly in the end. I used 6mm plywood for the outer frame and shelves, and 3mm plywood for the dividers. For all of the material, I cut down larger sheets, which is a lot more cost effective if you have the tools to do it. In total, I spent about $50 on all of the wood I used, which you'd probably spend on one single paint storage unit if you bought one instead of making one. Next was on to assembly. I used Titebond 3 for gluing all of the pieces together, as well as a bunch of clamps and 3-2-1 blocks to keep everything in place. There's definitely a good and a bad order to put laser cut pieces together. Doing a practice assembly run before you add glue into the mix helps a lot. I kept everything clamped and gave it a decent amount of time to dry before deciding to paint these units white. I just used some white spray paint for this. It's like a primer and paint combination. Did a couple of coats of that, let it thoroughly dry, and then it was time to install these units onto the wall. These dropper bottle storage units had these screw holes on each of the corners, so I marked where they needed to go. In most cases, ended up putting drywall anchors in and then just screwed it onto the wall. Really simple installation, and it felt very sturdy in the end. Then it was on to gluing together my custom storage units. I made 4 of these ones to go in the corner between the Scatus pegboards and the wall. Once I figured out the best order to put these together in. They went together really smoothly. This is actually a ton of fun to design and build, so I'm for sure going to be designing more laser cut projects in the future. Once I had my 4 units all glued together and had let them thoroughly dry, I decided to actually glue 2 of the units on top of each other so that they were more stable together. I didn't have to individually attach them as much, so I didn't have to put a million holes into my wall. And these ones I decided to leave as the plain wood. I thought it might be a nice switch up between all of the other white things that are on the wall between the pegboards and the other storage units. And realistically, there's going to be so much paint stored in these cubby holes that you're probably not going to really be able to see the storage unit itself much at all anyway. And speaking of the cubby hole design, I specifically had it designed like this because I like that they're grouped into colors as opposed to individually, because it means that if I add a bottle or use up one, I don't have to rearrange the entire setup like you would have to if each bottle had its own specific spot. When it comes to the dropper bottles though, I do kind of want them to have their own space so that I know better where they should actually be going in the storage unit, especially for these army painter bottles. I have the entire set, so they're organized in the color order that's like on the sheet, so I want to keep them exactly as they are in this order, so that if I'm referencing the sheet to try and find a color, I can easily find it. This is the section that's constantly growing as I pick up different paints for various projects. I decided that I didn't really like these plastic racks on my desk for my all-clad and metal color paints, so I printed these new holders that go on a Scatus board. One of the small Scatus boards fit perfectly on the wall in between the new paint storage, and it gives me the option to be more flexible with what I store there, because I can always move things around on the board or entirely change what types of supplies get stored. I've actually already added to it since filming my original clips, so here's what it's currently looking like. And here's what the redesigned paint station looks like all put together. And that's where I'm going to leave this paint corner transformation for now. I love how this turned out. It's going to be so useful for being able to easily find what paint I need, and it also makes for a pretty cool backdrop to film against, which is always a nice bonus. A massive thank you again to Creality for sending over the Falcon 2 Pro. If you're someone that's been looking at getting into laser cutting and engraving, then I think the Falcon 2 Pro could be an excellent option for you. I really like that everything you'd really need is included in the one model, so you really don't need any prior knowledge to laser cutting and engraving to know what kind of accessories really you should be purchasing alongside a particular machine. It has a lot of great safety features, which are always important, but especially if you're not somebody that's had a lot of experience using a particular type of machine. So all in all, just a really positive experience with the Falcon 2 Pro, and I cannot wait to continue using it on future projects. If you are somebody possibly interested in finding out more information on the Falcon 2 Pro, there will of course be links in the description box for that. That is everything, so thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.